My mom chose my brother over me my entire life, even missing my wedding for his party. This is about how my family relationship totally collapsed once I married Emily, who is 25F. I am 26M and in my last year of medical school. My mother has consistently given preference to my older brother, Marcus, who is 27 years old, over me. She has loved Marcus since we were kids and she has never concealed it from me. I'm not sure what it is about him that makes him her favorite. My parents chose to give me to my grandparents to raise for 8 years after I was born, only a year after Marcus. Taking care of Marcus and me simultaneously was too much for my mother to handle. My mother struggled to care for us both because she was suffering from postpartum depression, according to my grandparents. My mother intended to give me up to my grandparents, George and Eleanor Cooper, who saw the seriousness of her illness and didn't fight too hard. Robert, my 52M tall father, was unable to care for me by himself while working. I grew up in my grandparents' loving and contented home, feeling safe and content because I was unaware as a newborn that they were not my own parents. But things started to change when I was able to walk and comprehend speech. Occasionally, my parents would pay me a visit and explain that they were my biological parents and that I was only temporarily staying with my grandparents. For me, these visits were always perplexing and bittersweet. I was thrilled to see my folks, on the one hand. Conversely, I experienced a feeling of bewilderment and desolation. After playing and chatting with me for 2 to 3 hours, my parents would say farewell and head back home, taking Marcus with them. I realized that Marcus was always their top focus as this trend persisted. My parents' few visits made me feel unwelcome, even though my grandparents gave me all the love and attention they could. My parents finally took me back home when I turned 8 years old. I was initially thrilled to see my family again and be reunited with them. But as I realized how much better my life had been with my grandparents, the excitement gradually subsided. Living in the same room as Marcus was one of the first adjustments I had to make. My parents had the option of giving me a spare bedroom, but Marcus had always had his own. In order for Marcus and I to become brothers, they insisted that we share a room. Marcus made it quite evident to me that he detested this new arrangement. Marcus would label me a brat and a stranger if I read comic books my grandparents had bought me or played too loudly. Marcus would scoff and call me childish if I adorned my side of the room with posters or sketches of my favorite superheroes. Marcus would roll his eyes and mockingly refer to me as the teacher's pet if I proudly showed my parents my good grades when I brought them home. Marcus would tell me that I sounded terrible and that I should give up when I practiced playing the keyboard that my grandparents had given me. Marcus would make fun of me for even the smallest things, such as the way I arranged my toys or the way I described my day. The term dork or nerd would be used to describe me whenever I expressed an interest in reading or learning something new. I eventually came to the realization that the activities I liked turned into points of friction. There was a persistent sense of tension and conflict in place of the warmth and welcome I had experienced at my grandparents' house. Everything I did was problematic for Marcus, which made me feel self-conscious. Imagine being teased for every little thing by your older brother, someone you admire. It causes you to begin questioning yourself. I was too young to realize that he was really bullying me. I wanted to blend in with my family because I felt like I might be the issue. I only read my comic books in the school library after I stopped doing so at home. I completely quit using my keyboard. I did all of this in the hopes that if I changed, my brother would accept me. Unfortunately, Marcus's attitude toward me didn't change despite my best efforts to fit in and adapt. I felt like I was losing a piece of myself the more I attempted to win his approval. Marcus would still find ways to make fun of me even after I stopped doing all the things that irritated him. Due to a skin problem that has since been treated, I recall having a lot of pimples as a child. Marcus would continuously comment on how awful my face was and how ugly I looked. I would cry and go to my parents since hearing this was so painful. My mother, Linda, 50F, would encourage me to stop sobbing and be a man instead of standing by me and reprimanding Marcus. Dad was also of little assistance, he would want to avoid the situation. Instead of coming to Mom, she would advise me that I should confront my brother. I felt lost and alone as a result of Marcus's bullying and my parents' incapacity to provide me with a sense of security and love. I missed the supportive atmosphere I shared with my grandparents, where I always felt appreciated and understood. Whenever they could, my grandparents would come see me, and they would attempt to speak to Marcus politely and warn him not to bother me. However, he never gave them any attention. I gradually turned into a very irate teenager as I grew older. Marcus did not like it at all when I became taller than him, despite the fact that he was older than me. To annoy me, he would label me a slender man, or a giant because of my height. But this time, I began returning the favor by calling him a shrimp rather than requesting assistance from my parents. In order to prevent him from reaching his books without a chair, I would purposefully place them on the highest shelf or above the cabinet. This would give me an excuse to tease him. Even though I occasionally received reprimands for retaliating against him when he complained to our parents, I still felt a mixture of delight and remorse. It was satisfying to defend myself, but it also meant that our house was growing more antagonistic. We fought each other more often and fiercely, none of us prepared to give up. The annual awards ceremony at my school was the final straw that made it clear to me how much my parents preferred my brother above me. I was on the verge of winning the top prize in my class since I had put my all into my academics. I hoped for my parents' pride and encouragement, so I wanted their support and attendance at the event. However, my mother told me a few days prior to the ceremony that Marcus had a swimming competition on the same day. Even though his competition and my ceremony were hours apart, Marcus wanted to concentrate on his preparation because, in my mother's opinion, he needed her more. My dad would be there to support me, she told me. I accepted the fact that at least one parent would support me, despite my disappointment. I was taken aback when my dad unexpectedly failed to show up on the day of the wedding. Marcus was having a panic attack before his competition, and my mom apparently contacted him immediately to tell him that she needed him there to help him relax. Dad decided not to attend my award ceremony and instead hurried to Marcus's side. I recall that there were no recognized faces in the audience supporting me when I approached to accept my medal. All I could feel was a deep sense of abandonment and loneliness. Marcus and my dad weren't there when I got home later. When I contacted them, I found out that they were still with Marcus. It took them many hours to return, ecstatic and celebrating Marcus's triumph in his contest. They informed me how wonderfully he had done and he was holding an award. As though it were the most important thing of the year, they gave him a tight hug and congratulated him on his achievements. They didn't even offer me an apology for being absent from my ceremony. It was obviously a sobering reminder of my place in my parents' priorities. In contrast to Marcus, I was often overlooked and undervalued despite my efforts and accomplishments. Throughout my time in college, this trend persisted. My parents had a great celebration when Marcus was accepted to a nearby public institution, but they hardly noticed my acceptance to medical school. My mother continued to disparage Emily, a talented medical researcher, even after I began dating her. She would say that Emily was too focused on her profession and not enough on her family, and that I should look for someone more conventional, like Marcus's girlfriend. Let's move on to the primary motivation behind this writing. I asked Emily to marry me 6 months ago and she accepted. I had conflicting responses when I told my parents about the engagement out of courtesy and because I wanted them to hear the news from me rather than from someone else. My mom said nothing, but my dad thanked me and appeared really delighted for me. She then texted me to let me know how disappointed she was that I hadn't given her voice regarding Emily. I invited Marcus and everyone else to the wedding 2 months ago. Even though he didn't congratulate me after we got engaged, I still didn't feel bad about this and invited him to the wedding. I was a little let down when Marcus unexpectedly denied the invitation without providing an explanation. What really surprised me though, was when my dad called to let me know that my mom had chosen not to attend my wedding, even though he would be there. I was surprised and inquired as to why. My mom was going to my wedding, but my dad clarified that Marcus had allegedly scheduled an anniversary party for his girlfriend on the same day. I followed Marcus on social media and knew they had recently celebrated their anniversary, so this news was strange. I chose to speak with Marcus directly to get clarification rather than initially going up against my mother. Even though we didn't talk much, I wanted to treat the matter with dignity and respect. I gave Marcus a call and asked him directly if he was truly not intending to attend my wedding because of the anniversary party. Marcus surprised me by confirming that this was true. He clarified that at first, he and his girlfriend had intended to have a party to honor their anniversary, but they lacked the necessary funds. Marcus acknowledged that he had worked hard to find a unique location for their celebration that was within their means in order to make up for it to his fiancée. Unfortunately, he stated that my wedding day coincided with the venue's only available date. I apologized and politely pointed out that he could have picked a different day, highlighting how much I would have valued his attendance at my wedding. Marcus, however, responded that his girlfriend's pleasure was more important than anything else and made it plain that he wouldn't move their anniversary celebration date to fit my wedding schedule. His remarks were hurtful, and he ended the phone before I could respond. My mother provided the same old justification she frequently gave me when I phoned her to discuss the matter. She stressed that my dad was already going to attend my wedding, so I shouldn't be selfish and ask her to go too. And that Marcus would be upset if she didn't go to his anniversary celebration. My voice nearly broke as I told her how hurtful it was for me to always feel like she treated me less than my brother. I told her that although she was free to do as she pleased, I would no longer recognize her as a parent. My mother then laughed at what I had said and advised me not to get so worked up over my wedding. I decided to stop talking to my mother completely after the argument we had over her decision to not come to my wedding. My attention turned to making sure Emily had the most exquisite wedding and that our celebration was full of love and happiness. Even though I was disappointed with my parents, I was thankful that my dad kept his word and supported me on my special day. My grandparents, who had previously expected my mom's absence despite their encouragement, were naturally saddened and disappointed when Emily and I ultimately were married. They had even forewarned my mother in advance, stressing how crucial her attendance was. They were deeply affected by the fact that she still decided not to go. The situation worsened when Marcus posted photos from his anniversary celebration, in which my mother was seen drinking and dancing uncontrollably. The way they both appeared to show off their indifference to my feelings regarding their absence from my wedding was the problem, not what she was doing. That's the current situation. Throughout the day, my mother never once phoned Emily or me to say hello or to offer congratulations. Though I'm not sure how to move on, I do know that I can't allow them to continue to harm me in this way. Emily is understandably upset with their treatment of us, particularly with reference to our wedding, but she supports any choice I make. Is my desire to sever all contact with my mother and brother an overreaction? Is it time to accept that they will never change and move on with my life without them, or should I give them another chance to make things right? First update. My wedding was a month ago, and since then things have taken an unexpected turn. I got a ton of encouraging notes after I last posted about my mom picking my brother's anniversary party over my wedding. I appreciate all of your nice remarks and guidance. What has transpired since then is as follows. Although my grandparents, George and Eleanor, have always been my staunchest allies, I never thought they would act in such an extreme manner. They told my mother last week that they might take her out of their inheritance and leave me as the only heir. They said that their choice was the result of years of witnessing her ignore me and favor Marcus, not just the fact that she missed my wedding. According to my grandmother, she and my mother had a furious discussion during which she detailed all of the instances of favoritism she had seen over the years. She cited specific instances, such as my mother's unrelenting criticism of Emily, the disregard for my academic accomplishments, and her decision to go to Marcus's hurriedly organized anniversary party rather than my wedding. The way my mother reacted to this news was what truly surprised me. She called me nonstop within hours of finding out she might not be able to inherit. She was crying about the inheritance, not our tense relationship or the harm she had caused, when I eventually answered one of her calls. In fact, she asked, "How could you have allowed your grandparents to harm me like this? I am their daughter." Then she made a startling suggestion. In order for her to attend, she recommended that Emily and I conduct another wedding ceremony, this time with only close family members. She said she wanted to put things right after giving her actions a lot of thought. But when she promptly followed up with, "Once we do this, you can tell your grandparents everything is fine between us," her comments seemed false. Her attempt to explain her prior absence by stating, "You have to understand, Marcus needed me that day," was the most bizarre aspect. They had already paid for the location, and his partner was going through a difficult moment. What should I have done? She was still unable to recognize how her decisions had harmed me. Marcus also became involved and texted me in a furious manner. He said that I was manipulating our grandparents and making them hostile to the family. He wrote, "You've always been their favorite, and now you're using that to steal mom's inheritance." He didn't appear to see the irony of his criticism of favoritism. Emily was also contacted on social media by his girlfriend, who said that they were being unkind to Marcus by interfering with their anniversary celebration with all of this family drama. Emily replied, "Interesting how you're concerned about your anniversary celebration being ruined when you deliberately scheduled it on our wedding day, before blocking her right away. My father is now stuck in the middle, even though he was at least there during our wedding. He tried to be a mediator when he called me yesterday. He remarked, 'Your mother truly regrets missing the wedding. Is it not possible for you to perform this minor ceremony for her? It would mean so much.' He was silent for a while before acknowledging, 'She's not handling this well, but she does love you.' After I brought up the fact that mom appeared more focused on the inheritance than our relationship. Emily and I spoke about holding another ceremony, but we both felt that it would not feel genuine. A wedding isn't just a photo opportunity, Emily said. It's about sharing love with those who truly care about us. Your mother had the opportunity to attend but declined. The fact that my mother has begun to alter history is especially upsetting. She is explaining to her family that she was forced to miss the wedding since Marcus needed her assistance during a trying moment. Conveniently, she is omitting the fact that it was an anniversary celebration that was purposefully planned on the day of our wedding. Mom's sister, my aunt, called me lately to tell me about something fascinating. It seems that before the wedding, my mother had informed her that she was teaching me a lesson by not going. She assumed that I would abruptly give in and move our appointment to accommodate Marcus's party. She was truly surprised that I had planned the wedding without her when that didn't occur. Last week's phone conversation with Marcus was the most illuminating. Perhaps driven by resentment over the inheritance issue, he revealed in a rare moment of candor that there were other dates open for the anniversary celebration. His fiancée thought it would be lovely to celebrate on the same day as a family wedding, so they decided on our wedding date out of a number of alternatives. "You've always had everything handed to you by our grandparents," he said chillingly when I questioned why he would intentionally harm me in that way. "It's time you experienced what it's like to be disappointed." Through it all, Emily has been my pillar of support. She made a point that I hadn't thought of. My mother's sudden desire for a fresh ceremony isn't motivated by a want to commemorate our marriage, but rather by her wish to be a caring mother for our grandparents. Emily claimed that if she truly wanted to make amends, she would be expressing regret for years of favoritism rather than only attempting to set up a picture op. I am steadfast in my resolve to forego another ceremony. This is about upholding boundaries and self-respect, not about retaliation or retribution. My mother had the chance to be present on one of the most significant days of my life, but she declined. That fact cannot be altered by any number of contrived pictures or theatrical rituals. I'm currently not in communication with Marcus and only have sporadic contact with my parents. My grandparents have been quite supportive of this choice, telling me that sometimes the best course of action is to avoid harmful people. I'm resolutely pursuing my medical education while Emily and I concentrate on creating our future together. Sincerely, I feel lighter after standing my ground, even though I realize this update may come across as resentful. Yes, it is difficult to know that my brother purposefully attempted to overshadow my wedding day, and it is painful that my mother is more concerned with her inheritance than with our relationship. However, I'm not questioning myself or attempting to win their approval for the first time in my life. Perhaps learning to accept the family we have while forming the family we require is what it truly means to grow up. Update 2. 2 weeks have passed since my last update, and the matter is now resolved. My grandfather, George, called me yesterday to let me know that he and Grandma Eleanor had formally created new wills that excluded my mother entirely and named me as their only heir. Even though I had expected this to happen following my previous post, it still surprised me to hear it formally. My grandfather clarified that my mother's treatment of me wasn't the only factor in their choice. They think that I would be able to care for them in their later years more effectively than my mother could. He said that they had faith in my abilities to handle their money sensibly as a future doctor and that, "We trust you won't abandon us to a care facility unless absolutely necessary." As you might imagine, my mother, Linda, has not been pleased with this news. She has been phoning me nonstop and messaging me, saying I have no right to inherit anything from her parents and that I have deceived her. Despite the fact that I haven't gotten anything yet, it seems as though she believes I am stealing from her. She reacted with charges that I had swayed her in their favor when I adamantly advised her to speak with my grandparents directly about her concerns. I reminded her that any modifications to their will were a direct result of the things she had done over the years that had caused friction between us and affected their choice. As our disagreement heated up, she revealed something extremely upsetting in a moment of unadulterated honesty, or maybe resentment. She expressed her wish that I had never been created. She accused me of creating her postpartum depression and disclosed that I was an unplanned pregnancy. The most startling aspect was when she acknowledged that she had originally thought about placing me for adoption in order to get rid of me, but she changed her mind due to her parents' conservative beliefs and chose to have them take care of me instead. "With Marcus, things were always easier," she remarked. "He never required the same level of care that you did. I never felt inadequate as a mother because of him." At last, her comments clarified everything. She was partial to Marcus because she felt guilty and resentful of me, not because she wanted to love him more. For the first time since the wedding, I contacted my father, Robert, following that chat. He told me that he never regretted having me, even though he admitted that some of Mom's statements regarding my unplanned pregnancy and her battles with postpartum depression were accurate. He genuinely apologized for the first time after I told him how their years of favoritism toward Marcus had terribly wounded me. My dad has acknowledged my decision to give me some space, even though I'm not sure how we will continue to be friends. He now appears to realize how his passive part in my upbringing fueled the dysfunction in the family. Given how much I admired Marcus when we were younger, I sent him one last text telling him how he could have been a better and more encouraging brother. When I moved home with our parents, I talked openly about how lonely I felt growing up with our grandparents and how much I desired his approval. I made it plain that I had no grudges toward him for being Mom's favorite. He didn't, but I informed him that he had the option to be a supportive part of my life rather than compete with me. As an elder brother, I also expressed my disappointment in him and said I was ending our connection. His number is blocked, and I don't currently have any plans to unlock it anytime soon. Throughout it all, Emily has been my staunchest ally. Every day she reminds me that family is about individuals who choose to love and support you without conditions, not just genetic ties. Together, we're concentrating on creating our future, and I know that I can handle any obstacles that may arise because she is at my side. Although hearing my mother's admission of my birth and her animosity toward me was upsetting, it was also somewhat freeing. At last, it clarified the pattern of conduct I had encountered throughout my life. Even though it doesn't always make the hurt go away, realizing why someone injured you might help you realize that their behavior was never motivated by your value as a person. I appreciate all of your help along the way, Reddit. When I was doubting myself, your messages and remarks kept me going. It really helped to know that I wasn't the only one who had to deal with familial favoritism. I would especially like to thank individuals who had similar experiences. Through this process, I may have lost some family members, but I have also acquired self-respect, clarity, and the bravery to put my own health first. That can occasionally be the best bequest we can have.